Right. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this lovely, lovely terrace, lovely space in this most incredible part of London, here in the city, where I think you can have the greatest example of real estate in practice. You've got the old and you've got the new. You've got some of the most incredible buildings in London here in this part of the city. So today we are going to be talking to these two people here, Faisal and Rory, and we're going to have a really, really lovely fireside chat minus the fire.
Where's the fire?
Don't say that. We're in the wrong part of the city to make jokes. So really good showcase of real estate in action here in the city, because we're talking today about Proptech, and Proptech is the focus of technology on helping our built world and our buildings be more digital, be more sustainable, and the real estate sector more efficient. And Proptech itself is only really very young. It's sort of 10 or so years old. And it's no coincidence that we are also here to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Pi Labs, also 10 years old. And across Europe and globally, Pi Labs is synonymous with Proptech. It's seen as sort of the vanguard of the sector, the vanguard of Proptech becoming what it is today. And Pi Labs has been driving that, helping real estate move into whatever century we're in now, driving innovation and adopting new technologies to bring it into the future. So we're going to spend a bit of time listening to Faisal's story. Faisal is the founder and managing partner of Pi Labs. We're going to hear about his journey from entrepreneur to VC. We're going to learn a little bit about the inspiration that's driving him and the Pi Labs team, the innovations that we are most excited about, and the impact that we want to have on the world. Now, no shade to Faisal, but as a communications and PR professional and a venture partner at Pi Labs, I am a little bit starstruck to introduce Rory Cellan-Jones. Rory is, I think, self-proclaimed BBC lifer. He was very, very well known as a business correspondent for the BBC, covering some of the biggest stories you can think of. He joined in the early 80s and in 2007 was made technology correspondent. And you may remember he covered the launch of the very first iPhone in San Francisco at that time. And he has since then been helping us understand and make sense of this pace of digital change that we're all living through. I think he's described as the non-geek's geek, and is really helping us understand the impact of digital technologies on our lives and on our businesses. And that is also essentially what Proptech is. We live our lives and do all our business in the built environment, in the built world, and helping make sense of that is something we're all trying to do. Coincidentally, Rory and I had a chance to work together in 2015, about 10 years ago, which chimes with the 10 years of Proptech, when I was working on the launch of a tech-enabled building in Stockholm for a pension fund that was developing this building in the middle of the city. And one of the tech-enabled aspects was they were allowing users of the building to have a chip inserted under their skin, which would give them access to the building and help them use the printer, which wasn't a technology that really took off, but was probably a very early part of Proptech. And Rory was invited to cover it live for us for the BBC. And we had a couple of harrowing moments as the tattoo artist was preparing to put a chip into Rory's hand live on the telly. And we noticed some very bad words tattooed on the back of his neck. And he had terrible things written on his T-shirt. So the tattoo artist had to be sort of slightly hidden. But Rory approached that whole journey with the curiosity and the interest in what digital technology can do that we have seen from him ever since. And I think that champion of tech and that being a champion for business is something Rory and Faisal really, really share and what drives them. So today we're going to hear a little bit, I hope a lot, about these two perspectives from Faisal's side. How has he been helping to drive investment into this sector and challenge the sector to adopt technology? And from Rory's side, how has he been helping us understand change and make sense of it and prepare for the future? So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Faisal and Rory for a lovely fireside chat without the fire.
Faisal, hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Welcome, everyone. I was slightly concerned when we decided to do this fireside chat during London Tech Week. Welcome to everyone during London Tech Week. But it's hard to get people's attention. There's a lot going on. Everyone I've been speaking to has some evening engagement. So thank you for being here. But yeah, delighted to be here with you, Rory. I didn't know about the chip story. Having a fireside chat with a cyborg, I might be outcompeted here. You have the microchip and you, not me.
Well, we were also slightly worrying that we might be going to do a Rishi Sunak Downing Street podium event when we saw the thunderclouds, but they appear to have cleared. Faisal, let's go back in time. Let's get a bit of your origin story. We had a quick chat yesterday, and it's a really interesting story. So let's go back more than 10 years. Let's go back 20 years. You were in LA.
Yeah.
And what were you doing there?
Yeah. So I think everyone has like these, you could say like inspirational moments in their life. And for me, in my teens and into my early to mid 20s, I'm in Los Angeles. I'm in California. This is during the first .com boom. Companies like Amazon are emerging, and every day you watch the news and there's a new tech startup that's emerging.
This is after the bubble.
This is like during the bubble,
right?
Which is like, so I'm a student at UCLA in Westwood, Los Angeles. Reading the news and looking at this explosion of tech and innovation that's taking place, and I'm kind of double-minded. Do I want to stay in university, or do I want to actually be out there and be part of this innovation? And UCLA, like a couple of laid-back California universities, great university, but they have some laid-back aspects to it. You could do a fifth year, no problems. If you wanted to stay for a fifth year, you can stay for a fifth year. So I was genuinely debating, this is a beautiful campus.
You could have made a movie, you could have been...
Yeah, I could have just stayed in the bubble of academia, but I wanted to get out. I wanted to be part of the action. And I was very inspired by the explosion of innovation that was happening at the time.
And what occurred that you left California to end up in the UK?
So, unlike a lot of my friends who ended up working in .com startups, which is what they were called, I ended up in tech consulting, which is a bit more of the conservative end of tech. I was going into corporates and governments and helping them with their tech strategy.
Are you saying it was a big yawn? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I was coding. I was actually writing software code. So I can be technical, but that's not like where my strengths lie. I think I'm a much more strategic and commercial person, but I was writing code, which I loved the impact of technology and what we could do with it, but not actually behind the scenes being the programmer. So I jump ship 2 years into a corporate job, and thought I would, go into the entrepreneurial world and set up my own startup, which I ran for a couple of years. I didn't take it all the way through to an exit, but I started to wonder in my mid-20s, like, okay, what's next? I'd have all this business experience from having built something, but I need to round it off. So for like a lot of people who are a bit in transition, I decided to do an MBA, and got into the US kind of East Coast schools like MIT, etc. But Oxford had a very interesting scholarship, which I had heard about, and it was being funded by one of the co-founders of eBay. His name is Jeff Skoll. He's one of the California billionaires. He's if you guys don't know about Jeff Skoll, you should read about him. When Elon Musk was in trouble and had cash flow issues before he became the wealthiest man in the world, Jeff Skoll was the guy who was like helping to fund him, and Elon Musk was crashing on Jeff Skoll's couch back in the day. So this guy had this deal with Oxford where he would fund 5 entrepreneurs a year to study at his cost at Oxford, where he would fund the tuition and the living expenses. And I was lucky enough to get in 2008-09. And I was like, okay, this is an offer I can't refuse. I'm leaving California and coming to rainy England.
And how did you find rainy? How did you find Oxford in particular, which has got a particular character to it?
I kind of fell in love with the town when I first visited. I visited the summer before I started there, and it was just so dreamy and idyllic. And once I was there, actually, it was another one of those cases where do I really want to leave? This is a really nice bubble, particularly around the time when I was there. It was 08, 09. The world was imploding. For some reason, I have been, in the middle of these different crises around the world. I was
They follow you around.
yeah, in California for the .com bubble and burst. And then by the time I came here, the financial crisis was very much in full swing. And I was in Oxford, and I was very much kind of dreading graduating.
And tell us about you and your fellow MBA class of that year. I mean, do you still meet? Do you still know where those people are?
Yeah.
Do you still compete as to who's done best?
Yeah, we used to I actually have a reunion I'm going to this September and looking forward to that. And we have an inside joke in our WhatsApp group that, let's see who kind of flies in on their helicopters, at the reunion. And I don't know if anyone's going to be doing that, but yes, of course there is the competitive element. We've had people do some really interesting things, right? I've had a classmate who was the class clown, the guy that I would never have taken seriously, has had 3 exits and is now retired and living in, I think, Ecuador or somewhere in Central America. I have another classmate of mine who married a Googler, and on her profile, I always fit she's on Necker Island, just hanging out with early Googlers and Richard Branson. We've had a class that was super ambitious and did really well. One of my other classmates set up Seedrs, which is the crowdfunding platform. And they've gone on to fund so many companies in the UK tech ecosystem. And the year after me, we had...
Yeah, no, we were talking about this yesterday.
Yeah.
I filmed at the Side Business School a number of times, but once for BBC Sport, there was a preview of the boat race. And the reason I was there was to profile these 2 strapping 6-foot something or other American boys called Winklevoss. Does anybody remember the film, The Social Network? The Winklevi?
Winklevi. And Tyler.
They're the guys that successfully sued Zuckerberg, claiming he stole their idea. And we had to film them at the Side Business School. It became apparent during the filming in a lecture, this was the first time they'd seen the place. I'm not quite sure how hard they studied. I think they were doing a lot of rowing and a lot of partying. Because I think they'd already made their money by then.
They had already...
But you were not doing a lot of rowing or a lot of partying, were you? You were just working hard.
Well, when you get into that program, they tell you can only really do 2 things. So you either decide to study and you do sports, or you're going to study and you're going to party, or you're going to party and do sports. They were like, you just have to get laser focused. There's only 2 things you can focus on.
So what did you choose?
I would, I don't know.
And draw a veil
Leave it to the audience.
Yeah, we'll draw a veil over that.
Yeah.
So, next chapter involves a dragon. Tell us about that.
I happened to be at one of the events at Oxford. Oxford has this organization called Oxford Entrepreneurs. It's a student society, and they try to promote entrepreneurship on campus amongst the students. So they had organized for one of the dragons who was on Dragon's Den at that time, so 2009, to come and speak to the students in the Nelson Mandela Lecture Theatre, which is the main lecture theatre in the business school. Because the guy was a dragon, it was packed. It was fully packed, hardly any place to sit. Maybe also because we were in the middle of a financial crisis, the kind of lure of entrepreneurship was starting to kind of attract people, because nobody could get a normal job in those days. Like, you would talk to your career counselor, and McKinsey wasn't hiring, and industry wasn't hiring, the banks weren't hiring, so people were thinking outside the box. So a dragon comes along and is speaking to the audience. Students are there. I happen to be sitting in maybe the 2nd or 3rd row, and during the talk, or maybe after the talk, there was a Q&A, and I asked a couple of questions. I engaged. I don't remember what I asked. But after the talk, I went up to him, and I just got an inkling when he was talking about he had exited a recruitment. So this dragon, his name is James Kang. He was on Dragon's Den at that time, and he had exited his recruitment business, I think for 150 million. And he was saying that he was a private equity investor. But it was quite apparent that he didn't really know much about private equity. He had recently generated his wealth. And I just walked up to him afterwards and I said, hey, listen, why don't I put together a team of my MBA students, and I'll pick like the best 4 students in my class, and we'll come in this summer and we'll do a project with you, and we will look at how you currently evaluate deals. We'll look at your investment process, we'll map it out, and then we'll go around Mayfair and we'll talk to some of the other small cap and mid cap PE shops and see how they run their process, and we'll map your process to theirs and help bring some best practices to your new.
Can I just say, that sounds like a bold...
Honestly, I knew nothing about private equity. I don't even know how I came up with that pitch, because I knew nothing about private equity. I didn't know anyone in Mayfair. I didn't know who these...
Was this complete bullshit?
It wasn't. The thing is, like, I had an instinct that he was keen. He wanted to invest, and he had started to make investments. But Dragon's Den investments are not generally great investments. Like, yeah, a couple of them been breakout successes, but very few. And I got the sense that he was, and he would admit it if he was sitting here today, he was probably winging it back then, but he wanted to be taken seriously. So I said, well,
so we got another guy who was winging it to help him.
But what I did do, I think people knew in my class that Faisal is somebody who takes himself seriously. Like when I would assemble a study group or somebody invited me to their study group, we would get shit done. And it was going to be a project that delivered. So when I secured the James Caan mandate, because he said to me at that time, he said, I love the idea, here's my card. I had the ability to pull together the smartest people in my class. And one of the guys who was on the team is now I think the youngest parliamentarian in Canada, very close to Justin Trudeau, like constantly seeing him next to him. Yeah. These were some really smart people. But we put together a team of 4, me plus 3. We went in the summer of 2009, and we basically built out an operations manual for a private equity firm and mapped out all the processes. And if you go to James Caan's Mayfair office today, he's got it framed. It's like a tube map sized, massive flowchart called the Hamilton Bradshaw Best Process or something. And then you look at the bottom, you read the fine print, and it says by Oxford Strategic Consulting Partners. And it lists the 4 of us out. And we're no Oxford Strategic Consulting Partners. We were a bunch of students. But we did a good job, and he actually still uses the process today.
Brilliant. And you worked for him for a while? Or?
Yeah, I worked. And then, so it was that summer, the project. And at the end, he was like, hey, do you want to come on board? But I had no investment experience. So he just said, why don't you shadow me for a year? And that sounded interesting. Like he was known and networked, and I didn't know anyone. I was a total outsider and an immigrant, right? So I was like, this sounds good, right? I could shadow this dragon, probably really enhance my network. And, everyone he met then, so I took on the job, and everybody he met would be CEO level, other investors, family offices, government. And I was always in the room. Probably had nothing to contribute, but I was listening and taking notes and stuff.
You're a good listener.
Yeah, but I don't know. Am I? I've tried to get better. But I was always trying to hustle and also build up my own network. And he knew that, and he was fine with it. So like anyone who came to the room to meet James Caan would soon become my contact as well, right? And so very rapidly, as an outsider to the PE world and an immigrant, not from the country, who didn't have any school network here, I kind of fast-tracked my network in by working with a celebrity dragon in Mayfair. And pretty soon I'd walk down Grosvenor Street and I'd be able to say, hey, I knew people. And that felt good, because when you're new in a country, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's daunting.
So what happens next when you decide to flee the nest, as it were?
Yeah. I think I was quite ambitious at that point, and the type of investments I was making with James Caan at that point were in property. So I actually started to make my first property-related businesses with him, and the deal was I would co-invest. We would find like a management team that was doing something different in property. I would run the deal and I would source it and I would co-invest a little bit of my own money. And then he would put up most of the capital. We're talking like 95-5, right?
Yes. Yeah.
But after a while, I was, getting a bit more confident and I would negotiate the deal with him and I'd be like, hey, can we make it 90-10 on the next deal?
And this was pure property. There was nothing tech.
It was all property related businesses. So we weren't investing in like bricks and mortar, but like it was things like we backed, it was weird, quirky things that nobody was doing at the time. It was too small and bitty for any PE shop to be even looking at it. So we backed like an interior design business. We backed a project management business. We backed a real estate fund management business. Everything had something to do with real estate. That was so my hypothesis at the time, which has evolved, was the world is in the middle of or is emerging from a crisis that has its roots in real estate. Global financial crisis had its origins in mortgages. So this industry is going to see some change and churn and some disarray, and out of that disarray will come new shops and new management teams and new platforms, and we should set ourselves up to back them. So that was the thesis. And he was like, that sounds interesting. He knew nothing about it, but he said, if you find the deals and you put in some of your own money, I'll come behind you. So anyway, I kept negotiating the deal to the point where it went from 90-10 to like 80-20 to at one point, it was like, can we do 50-50? And at that point, it was like, I was ready to kind of go. Right. I was unemployable at that point. I wanted to do it by myself. But my thesis at that point evolved. Around 2013, I started to be interested I got fascinated with the intersection of tech and property, less traditional real estate businesses. And when I would take the tech deals to him, he couldn't get his head around it. He was a traditional guy.
So what kind of tech deals were available back then?
Back then in 2013, like I backed the first online estate agent, which went from
is it that late? Yeah. I mean, that says something about this industry, doesn't it?
I mean, that sector didn't work out, but it was a real learning experience for me. Like I put $100,000 of my own money into a company that went from a 1 million valuation to 100 million on paper, was about to be listed. We had appointed the stockbrokers to actually list the company. It was raising a pre-IPO round, couldn't get the pre-IPO round away. Company went bust. Everyone lost all their money. Like it was a very important lesson to learn.
And how did that feel?
I mean, God, that there were just so many. It was such a roller coaster ride all the way to the end. And it just taught me a lot. I think that one of the things I tried to do there was I thought I could, by that point, I'd built up a bit of a network. So I thought if I can build up the dream investor team and go into this startup, I can really impact it and turn it around, even if the management team was not stellar. Mm. And I think that's just one of those things I learned early on. Sure. Management teams are everything, no matter what you bring to the table, no matter who's on the investor side and which advisors you put on and what NEDs you put in there. If the management team itself is not rock solid, it's not going to be the winner in its category. It was such an important lesson to learn early on, and we kind of apply that mindset in all the deals that we're investing in. We know that we can make a difference, but that's just in my top. Really, the core of execution lies with management. It seems so self-explanatory and simple, but I learned it early the hard way, burning 100,000 money.
Right. So you had skin in the game there. But you weren't discouraged. What was your next move?
Well, at that point, I didn't know, right, that this company would fail 5 years later. So at that point, I'm still very much in the exuberance of like, I just backed the first online estate agent. This thing's going to go heist, right?
Yeah.
And at that, you're thinking like what your equity might be worth, and you're thinking about what you might buy with it, et cetera, et cetera. You start to,
what were you going to, was it yachts? Was it cars? Was it castles?
I hadn't gone that far.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I then backed the first, UK digital commercial brokerage, a company called Hubble, as a personal investor.
Hubble?
Yeah.
I kind of remember them.
Yeah, they had their
they had virtual workspaces.
Yeah. So basically, the whole idea was
They weren't really property, were they? They were virtual.
well, they were basically a marketplace for flexible offices.
Right.
The idea was that there were so many different brands that for a company looking for office space, you would go through a platform.
Right.
Yeah. And then very quickly afterwards, I backed the first digital mortgage broker, which then after me, Goldman Sachs came in and a lot of other institutional capital piled in. So, and these deals were done in rapid succession. So I maybe made the 3 investments within a 9-month period in 2014. I started to get inundated off the back of these 3 investments by a lot of entrepreneurs that had all kinds of ideas related to the digitalization of property.
And you by then completely focused on property and had in your mind this Proptech idea?
Yeah, the hypothesis was real estate is the world's largest and most valuable asset class, but relative to other major industries, it's undigitalized and it has a major sustainability problem. And over the next 10 years, it's going to go through this same digital transformation that all the other industries have gone through. And I want to be at the kind of center of that movement and set up a dedicated platform, PiLabs, set up in 2015, to capture that opportunity. And I was thinking, well, Airbnb had just emerged and had become a global behemoth and was disrupting the hospitality industry. And I was like, okay, that is not one isolated example. We're going to see many such examples emerge that achieve global scale. And so I set up PiLabs to be the leading kind of specialist investor focused on this.
So that's 2015.
2015. So 2014, I make 3 investments in rapid succession, start to get inundated by business plans from kind of all over. And then that's when I realized, okay, I can't do this with my personal money. And I can't do this even in syndicates where I like bring people into deals. There has to be a dedicated platform. We raise third-party capital. The problem is I'm not very connected even at this point. So I don't know how to raise money.
Yeah. and that's a skill you really need in this business.
You really do. You really do.
So what do you do?
So in 2014, I'm like on a tube and I'm shuttling between Shoreditch and Mayfair. And I've had a lot of these.
I'm trying to work out who's going to meet on this tube now.
I don't meet anyone on the tube, but I remember if you Google me and you get an old picture, you'll see me in a 3-piece suit because I'm a Mayfair guy. But I really, where my heart and passion lies is tech and innovation. So I would be shuttling to get to Shoreditch as quickly as possible.
Oh, quick change on the tube.
I would do a quick change on the tube and turn into a tech guy in Shoreditch. So that was my Clark Kent Superman transformation that would take place on the Central Line. Because I didn't want to come off as like, this snobby, like Mayfair stuffy guy.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't going to be taken serious by some hipster in Shoreditch, right?
Yeah.
So I needed to be like them. So I would hang out at this place called the Breakfast Club, which is now all over London. But back then there was just one place in Shoreditch. It was a place I would hang out at a place called Ozone, cafe that hipsters frequent in Shoreditch, and Breakfast Club, the original Breakfast Club, not the one that's become the chain. And I would meet entrepreneurs and go over their business plans with them. And at that, I had no money to invest, but I was kind of, I had done 3 deals. I'd put together, syndicates and had actually funded them. So at that point, I'm thinking, okay, we need to set something up. So like somewhere on this tube journey on the Central Line, I think of PiLabs. I think dedicated accelerator, I'm thinking initially, because like there's nothing to do late stage. There's no Series A companies to back. There's no Series B companies. This is totally embryonic. We're going to go in at ground zero and back them at idea stage. And I come up with the idea of PiLabs. I think of the mathematical pi, which is still in our logo. So if you think of our logo, it's the light bulb and it has the mathematical pi coming out of the light bulb. So that was the idea, was like the science was breaking out of the lab and we were ready to kind of capture it and commercialize it.
So we probably need to accelerate.
But pi also stood for property innovation.
Aha.
Yeah.
How truth can be told.
Yeah.
So at what stage after 2015 did you realize that this was working?
Well, I had to raise the money, and I raised it in the most unconventional and, you could say, creative way. So my friend or classmate Jeff Lynn from Oxford had set up a platform called Seedrs. He'd recently become FCA authorized. He was using the platform to help the crowd invest in startups. And I call up Jeff one day and I say, hey, listen, I'm thinking of setting up this VC business, and we need to raise our first fund. Could I raise it on your platform? Because I don't have the contacts. I don't have the relationships. I'm still pretty new. I have a couple of contacts and relationships I've built up, but I've never raised money. So I asked him if he could do that. And Jeff's an American lawyer, very straight. He's very he's going to look at it from a legal structuring perspective. He's like, well, we're not structured to do that. I'm like, okay, well, why don't you go speak to your team and see if you can perhaps do something here? And I was thinking, how am I going to get this off the ground? I had the idea, really had the inkling this is going to work, but didn't have the money. Jeff calls me back a couple of days and he's like, hey, listen, I've talked to the lawyers. I think we can make it work. For him, it was just a structuring problem to be solved.
We raised $1 million, which partly was raised on Seedrs. A whole bunch of people we knew and professionals in the industry, people worked at JLL and, Savills and agents, people worked at like real estate private equity shops. So the kind of the professionals in the real estate firms were thinking, oh, this is really interesting. He's onto something. This industry should be more digital. It should be more sustainable. So while the corporates and the balance sheets and the institutional capital wasn't ready, the people were ready. So they were the ones who supported. And it's so nice now because that first fund we recently announced is delivered a 10x gross, 8x net. So for every dollar that people invested, people got $8 back. I sometimes run into people on the street and they say, man, I'm so happy I invested in that fund. It did really well. And that's awesome, right?
Let's move a bit forward 2 or 3 years. And what kind of stuff are you investing in, and what is happening in this Proptech landscape?
So obviously Proptech has come a long way, and PyLabs has come a long way with it. We now are investing out of a $90 million fund. Our investors include, institutions like APG, which is a Dutch pension fund, and, groups out of the US like Greystar, a bunch of listed REITs out of London, Hong Kong listed companies. So a whole bunch of global investors are now behind us. So we've got the war chest to go out and really invest at scale. We're still investing early stage. We've stuck to our knitting. So we're doing like pre-seed to A, and the themes have changed, right? So what we do hasn't changed. We've stuck to early stage. We've stuck to largely a European thesis. So we're investing in European companies going global. Like, we've invested in London, Paris, Berlin, Oslo, Stockholm, Bucharest, Tel Aviv. So really UK, Europe into Israel, but only into global startups. So give us a feel for the technology. The technology. Okay. Obviously, AI is really big right now, but I'd say that I don't feel like we've jumped onto the AI bandwagon. We've been investing in AI for years. But what has changed?
What's AI doing for Proptech?
A lot of different things. Like we've got this company called Contilio, which is using AI to monitor a construction site. So if something goes wrong, you kind of find out in real time, and it avoids all the waste that goes into finding out 3 weeks later that you built the wall incorrectly, right? And so we've backed a robotics business out of Tel Aviv that can paint and plaster walls at parity with humans without the health and safety issues and can work 24/7.
Oh, that's fun.
One thing I've noticed is that 3 years ago, the sustainability companies in our portfolios are probably the slowest growers. They didn't have the exciting growth metrics that you want to see in a tech company, but that's changed. Now, some of our best performing companies are the ones that are solving the sustainability challenge for the real estate owner operator, because the owner operator is now willing to invest and is taking sustainability seriously.
Give us an example of the kind of company.
Oh, we have a portfolio company here today. They're called Dynam Logic. Mike should raise his hand and say hi. And they're aggregating data from your BMS systems, your sensors, your heating and cooling systems, and using AI to give recommendations to owners on what they can do to reduce their carbon emissions and energy usage. And their clients include Grosvenor, Crown Estate, LNG. They've got really got
It's
a lot
basic energy efficiency stuff,
of energy efficiency,
which has been incredibly slow to come in this.
It's been incredibly slow.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike would admit himself, like his growth trajectory has, gone from being less hockey stick like to more hockey stick like in recent, kind of years. And that speaks to the market and how the market's really adopting this now.
Okay, biggest success and biggest failure.
Oh God. Well, people here know the power law. The power law of venture is that for any 10 investments you make, like 1 or 2 shoot it out of the park and disproportionately return the overall portfolio, and a whole bunch don't do well. Like let's say 4 out of 10 don't do well. 4 out of 10 kind of are okay returners.
So remarkably similar to the publishing world. I've published a few books lately, and all books lose money except Richard Osman, and he funds the rest.
Yeah. It's a bit like that. So, we have a company. So in terms of like top performers, there's a company we're very excited about right now. It's a company called Addict Mind. They basically overlay a digital layer on top of a shopping center or a shopping street. So you guys, everyone searches on Amazon. Amazon has a searchability that's just real time. You want to search for blue jeans or whatever, you can find it. But shopping centers and physical retail doesn't have that. But this company, Addict Mind, that we backed, is using AI to help the visitor of any retail space search all the inventory so that they can have a truly omni-channel experience when they're in spaces.
Okay, and biggest dud.
Oh, that's difficult. I can't name names.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. But what have you learned?
Well, certainly like drawn lessons learned.
Yeah. What lessons have you learned from the ones that have gone wrong? I mean, apart from the obvious one that if you think you can turn a mediocre management team into superstars, you're wrong.
I think one of the lessons we learned early, our fund size was so small in the earlier funds, was that we didn't have much reserve capital for following on. And for the ones that really do shoot it out of the park and are doing well, and then the numbers are coming through and you're getting the quarterly metrics and it's very obvious it's working, you want to pile in. That's the one you should double down into. And in earlier funds, we didn't have the reserve capital to follow on. So now we do in our current fund and future funds. We tend to have a nice, allocation for following on into our best performers. So that's one of the lessons learned, like definitely have some reserve capital for your winners.
In a moment, I'm going to see if we can get some questions from the audience. But finally, I just want you to look forward 5-10 years. What's going to happen in the Proptech world is because Proptech has not really yet broken through as a sort of popular term, has it outside the inner circle, as it were.
I think a lot of companies and technologies are within there's a lot of technologies that are at R&D stage, like the AI and robotics company. So they haven't even broken out into the commercial world. No customer would have heard of them yet. Okibo, our robotics company, kind of falls into that category. Like you don't see robotic painters painting here, but you might see.
I'm letting that's
yeah,
unusually digital.
And there's a lot of companies that are at pilot stage where they have a limited pilot happening in a building and they're proving out their KPIs and their use case. So I think what just needs to happen is like the companies in R&D need to start getting to that commercialization stage. The companies that are at pilot stage need to pass and succeed to get to the commercialization at scale stage. Because like when a landlord says, yep, it's working in that one building, now you can have 5. Okay, it's working in those 5, now you can have 50. It's working in those 50, now you can have 500. That's when you start to see the scale. And companies are still going through that journey. So I think it's just a matter of being patient and seeing that journey through. And when you start to see that, you're going to start to see the unicorns in the sector emerge. I'll be the first to admit that it's taken longer than people have wanted to see the unicorns emerge. But I also think that sometimes it's better just to be patient and do it right and have it linked to revenues as opposed to height.
And is London going to be a place to do this? I mean,
Absolutely. I think just
had an IPO today of Raspberry Pi, which I was involved with right from the start. That the only sort of bright spot.
I think in terms of where the startups will emerge, I think London is the hub for PropTech globally, along like it is for fintech. Now, New York also is a major hub for PropTech. Whether they list in London or not, hard to say until, we won't, that's a longer debate about, the regulations around the stock exchange. Like last year, the largest listing in the US was a British company, Arm Holdings.
Yeah.
So yes, I absolutely believe that innovation and the companies will emerge from London. Whether they actually go public here or not, hard to say.
Okay, Faisal, you've given us a fantastic overview. Let's see if there's a few questions from this fine crowd.
We spoke for too long.
Faisal, what would you say was the one that got away?
That's a good question. If what was the one that got away?
I mean, I would say if I'd set up 2 years earlier and happened to be in California and was connected happened to be connected to the Y Combinator crew at that time, Airbnb. That's the one.
Well, I think.
Okay.
Drink, please.
Thank you very much, Faisal. That was fascinating. Brilliant.
Hope you enjoyed it. Let's enjoy and have a drink.
Thank you.